Revolting news coming to you from our underground cultural bunker in Lower Manhattan, and we have, I think, a treat for you today. We have John Ewbank from Australia, a singer-songwriter, and he's going to take over the show as soon as I ask him a few pointed and political and cultural questions. John, Americans know about as much, even less about Australia than they know about Canada. A certain large percentage of Americans think that Canada is another U.S. state. I don't know if they'll say that about Australia, but Pommy bastards. I'm sort of refreshing my mind that that's what the English call the Australians, right?
No.
The other way around?
Yes.
See how confused I am, and I'm comparatively wise. Does that stand for Pacific Orient?
There's a lot of different theories as to what POM stands for. P-O-M, it could be prisoner, actually spelled P-O-H-M. It supposedly stands for a prisoner of Her Majesty the Queen, which is when the early English prisoners were transported to Australia in the 18th century. There are various theories as to how POM came about, but it's a sort of a derogatory title, but in a light-hearted manner, to call someone a POM.
Right.
And then if you want it to be more derogatory, you just start adding Pommy bastard or Pommy chump.
Is there a particular corresponding phrase for Yanks?
Septics. Yanks are called...
After tank?
Yes. It's sort of... there's a lot of rhyming slang in Australia, which they take from the Cockneys.
So what were the...
From the London Cockneys. So, for example, you got all the traditional stuff like, you're going home tonight, see the trouble and strife is the wife. I'm going up to bed now, I'm going to go up the apples and pears. So you're going up the stairs. So you got rhyming slang all the time. So Yanks becomes septic tanks, rhymes with Yanks.
I thought it was
but you'd
septic pricks.
No. So it often gets cut down. People who talk rhyming slang a lot, you don't even bother giving the punchline. You wouldn't even bother saying septic tanks to let the person know it rhymes with Yanks. You'd just call them septics. Yeah, we were in a pub the other night. There was a half a dozen POMs and a couple of septics, and 2 werrises.
2 what?
A werris. A werris is a Werris Creek, which is a Greek. Rhyming slang. I mean, the rhyming slang is a
big thing.
It's a dying art form, unfortunately. It's a very creative and very funny art form.
Is it still going in England?
Oh yeah, sure. Mainly amongst the working class. It's always basically been a working class phenomenon. It has
sort of a cryptic language, the way the blacks in America had one. A language of the oppressed, so to speak.
It is cryptic, and it has its own beauty, and it also there's a tremendous
secret language.
There's a tremendous space within it for saying other things about the very thing that one is actually rhyming. For example, septic tank to rhyme with Yank is obviously not totally innocent. There is an innuendo there. Different innuendo again when you call a Greek a Werris Creek. Werris Creek is a very famous small river, by the way, in Australia.
And what would that signify, that creek mean?
Werris Creek, well, I think it's more playful. I think it's more playful than septic tank. Septic tank has a definite slightly hard edge to it.
Are there songs in there that are entirely in
there probably are, you know. That's interesting. I'll bet there are. I'll bet somewhere in people who study folk music, if they studied Cockney music in London, I'll bet there's songs that are written almost entirely in rhyming slang.
So when did your forebears come to the beloved continent?
The beloved continent being Australia?
Yeah.
Well, no, I was born in England.
I see.
So I am a strange mixture. I'm a Pommy bastard.
Yeah.
And also, I suppose, my family migrated to Australia when I was 15 years old. So I have both. And to this day, I have my English nationality, my English citizenship, and I'm a naturalized Australian.
And so your speech can be recognized as English in Australia?
It goes both ways. My accent changes a lot. When I get back in Australia, I start sounding very Australian after a couple of months. When I go back to England, I start to sound very English.
Where were you from in England?
I was born in a very industrial town called Bradford. It's in Yorkshire. It's in the north.
Yeah.
And it was a boom town. Bradford is a great story. Bradford was a boom town, a post-war boom town where they could not get enough labor to fill the mills. All the woolen products for the entire British Empire were manufactured in Bradford. So to fill the mills, migrant workers were employed from all over the English Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth. And after the boom finished, there's tremendous unemployment. So Bradford now has the biggest black population in the whole of England. And during the 60s and 70s, when the boom finished, all the mills are now idle. A lot of people left. For example, my family migrated to Australia to find work.
Any of the black?
Is that near London or in the Midlands? Where in England?
Yorkshire is 200 miles north of London. It was once part of Scotland. Part of Yorkshire was once part of Scotland. In fact, culturally, it has possibly more similarities. There's probably more similarities between a Yorkshire personality or a Yorkshire ethos and the Scottish than there is between Yorkshire and England. There's always been a traditional antagonism between people in the north of England, and people in the south. The south has always been the rich, genteel part, and the people in the north have always been the rather ragged, working class.
What's the
Thatcher had this whole north-south strategy. She played off the south against the north to win elections.
That's absolutely true. The north suffered tremendously in the Thatcher years. The unemployment in places like Bradford, Liverpool, Leeds, all the big northern towns, Newcastle upon Town.
Yeah, Newcastle. How far is Bradford from Newcastle?
It's about 80 miles from Newcastle.
So it's right up there.
The depression was still is. In some northern towns now, I think it's like 25% unemployment in some of the big northern towns. So there's a lot of antagonism between Yorkshire and London. Northern people feel the same sense of dispossession that the Scottish and the Irish feel. They feel that the seat of power, which is in London, doesn't really care about them. And of course there's a lot of truth in it.
Well, the voting is always the Midlands and Scotland against the rest of England.
Yes, the North has always traditionally had a very strong Labour vote. The South has a strong Conservative vote, which is converts in America to saying the South has a very strong Republican vote and the North has a strong Democratic vote, although the Democratic Party, of course, is well to the right of the English Labour Party.
So what about Australia?
Yeah, what about Australia?
Who's in power at the moment in Australia?
I don't even know. I don't even know.
I think it's Labour, but
no.
Yeah, see that? We came to the right guy. I just heard CNN, for you cable people, has the parliaments of the world sometime. The British Parliament is very amusing because they're always attacking each other in very clever ways. Nothing like the U.S. Congress, which is also very boring and on constantly. And they showed the Irish Parliament, too. The brogue was so wonderful to listen to. A lot of rancor there. And the Australians were on once, too. And I discovered the secret of the Australian accent. It's just, you just change the A sound to I. Is there any other difference?
Oh, there's a lot of other differences,
right,
but
well.
that's definitely one of the most obvious.
Yeah. And is that from a particular region of England?
People say Cockney, and there is a tremendous Cockney.
Do you know anything about the... one more question and then we should go on to singing. A lot of political prisoners... I mean, people who burgle things, I think, are political prisoners, too, but a lot of the Australians were really political prisoners, like Luddites and people who had broken political laws. Is there any remnants of that, and I don't know how I suppose, is that why the Labour Party exists and there's a strong party in Australia, because of the political convicts?
No, I think that the Labour Party exists simply because British institutions were transferred lock, stock and barrel with the early settlers.
It's the same in Canada, actually. Canada, which didn't have the transported convicts, also has a strong Labour Party. Only the U.S., the greatest country in the world, has no Labour Party. Okay, let's go on to, I'm going to turn the rest of the show over to John singing, and I know you'll enjoy it. I've heard some of it, and I think it's wonderful. Okay, John?
So we got talking about politics there, so I'll start with a little political song from years and years ago, which I've not played for ages, but I think maybe it will appeal to your audience from what you told me about the main thrust of your show. It's a little song that I wrote years ago when Mitterrand got into power in France, and of course it was touted as a great socialist left-wing victory, but you know the French left-wing is is not very far to the left. There's a little song called Après la Révolution. I've traveled France from Le Havre to Mont Blanc, from Nancy to Nice in the south. Yeah, I've walked through the streets with no shoes on my feet and nothing to eat in my mouth. The workers I meet are oppressed by the wealth of a land only they could have made. So I teach them Marx, and I wait for the sparks, and I dream of the barricades. Après la Révolution, where Paris will blossom again. We spend our time drinking red wine and drowning the rich in the Seine. There'll be freedom for dogs and freedom for cats and freedom for you and for me. There'll be free quiche Lorraine on board every train and death for the bourgeoisie. Après la Révolution, all of the workers will cheer. We lie in bed, eating frog's legs until they jump out of our ears. There'll be Gruyere and Camembert, partridge and quail, fresh croissants and coffee each day. With a passion and power, we turn the great Eiffel Tower into a phallus for Jean Genet. Après la Révolution, we smash every bust of de Gaulle. And our most famous martyr, our dear Jean-Paul Sartre, we shall rename as St. Paul. There'll be Degas and Rodins and Cézannes and Gauguins no Yanks will be able to buy. But Marcuse will not be a loser. He'll get the house at Versailles. Après la Révolution, we will send arms to Quebec. And as a posthumous present to Cartier-Bresson, Lord Snowden will be chopped at the neck. And Cocteau and Balzac and Piaf will come back and join us as we sing and dance. Long live Francois Truffaut and Rimbaud and Bardot, and long live the glory of France. France, France, France. Viva la Révolution, viva la Révolution, viva la Révolution.
Very nice.
Well, thank you. An interesting thing about isolationism, talking about Australian isolationism and Australian cultural isolationism, is, of course, Australia is far less culturally isolated than America which is fascinating for an Australian to come here. For example, that song, I mean, it's a wee bit on the academic intellectual side, in as much as the more references one gets, the funnier the song is. But of course one can get the song and just only understand a few of the references. What's interesting is that that song, I played around Australia, which of course is far removed from France, and the people are pretty up there as far as their knowledge of French history. I've sung that song in clubs in New York, which is supposedly one of the great capitals, cultural capitals of the world, and the audiences have been they've been like stunned mullets. The audiences here just do not understand a lot of the references. So it's very interesting. This whole idea of Australian isolationism is a very interesting thing. In many ways it's far more open than America, because it's always looking out to the rest of the world, mainly because of its own sense of insecurity. But whatever the reasons, nevertheless, that is what the people do. Canadians do the same thing. They're always looking out to the rest of the world. People in Europe do it. There's this sense that it's elsewhere. And it's, I think, maybe one of the greatest cultural differences between America and the rest of the world. America doesn't have that sense. America has the sense that it is not elsewhere. America suffers from totally the reverse. Americans generally think it is here. We are it. This is the center of the universe. We are the world. We are the world. We are the people.
That was done by Marcos. If you remember that, Marcos and his family had a birthday celebration. They all got together and sang that song.
They sang "We Are the World."
Home video.
In their case,
they were the world.
In their case, it was probably true. We own the world. Yes. In their case, it was probably true. But that's
just one terrible interruption. Clinton sang the same song with who's
the Streisand woman and his wife.
And the kid that looks like Diana Ross, what's his name?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, Michael Jackson, yes.
Yeah, they all were the world, too.
Yes, well, it's an easy sentiment to identify with, I guess. I love Michael Jackson's dancing. I watched him the other night. I love his moves. But anyway, yes, yes. So, ask me a question about Australia.
What's the economic situation? Is there immigration
Grim.
Still immigration? Is there a country that wants to take the people from
Well, then it used to be they were, if you were white at least, they would send you a plane ticket?
Well, no. Well, during those days, basically, well, of course, in those days it wasn't actually an aeroplane. Before jumbo jets, as far as physical isolation goes, the trip from Europe to Australia was a 6-week voyage. And when we migrated, we went on the ship. An air ticket at that point cost about the equivalent almost of buying a house. That is how expensive airfare used to be, comparatively. So they wouldn't actually buy you a plane ticket. But the migration policy was that if you qualified for migration to Australia, which needed labor, not just skilled labor, it needed labor of all sorts, you could migrate there for £10. Now £10 English pound sterling is $20, and we're talking the 1950s and 60s, so comparatively with inflation you're talking about probably $80 or $100. So you could move completely around the world with your entire family and become part of the Australian labour force instead of being part of the English labour force, and you could toil in the sunshine instead of toiling in the rain, and you could move to Australia. Now, as far as it being open only to whites, that was never true. The official policy is that it was open to everyone. The actual policy in practice is that most people who applied were whites, and most people who were accepted were whites. There's a whole hidden agenda within that. Australia is a very, very, very racist country. But I would be hard to say, because my knowledge of America is so scant. I lived in Los Angeles for a year. I lived in San Francisco for a few months. I've traveled around America quite a lot, and I've lived in Manhattan on and off for 6 years. I've never been to the South. I've never been to the Northwest. I've never lived in the Heartland. Or Manhattan is obviously its own world, and my particular world is a very tiny segment of that. But I think they're both up there. They're both up there, but what nation isn't? It's really just, it's not really a case of who's the most racist anymore. The reality is who is the best at the PR job, who's the best at pointing fingers. Now, when America starts pointing the finger at South Africa, or when Australians have the audacity to start pointing the finger at South Africa, what can one do apart from jump out of a window? It's pathetic. I mean, racism is rampant in virtually every country on earth, whether it's Turkey or whether it's England or Ireland,
or Romania and Bulgaria.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's.
Well, we're seeing a new blossoming in Europe now as the dictatorships have, the communist dictatorships have.
Well, no, I don't think it's just the communist dictatorships. I think it's the false lines that were drawn in the World War. After all those insane lines which mean nothing. These are just lines drawn on a map. And the same thing.
You can't draw lines anymore.
No, well, the same thing is happening in the Arab world. The way it was sliced up by the Allies, it doesn't work.
Well, the British set up Iraq without a deep-sea port, which is one of the problems we're having now.
And it's one of the reasons they did that. One of the reasons was to make sure that each Arab country would always want to fight its neighbor, was to make sure that no Arab country would be able to become. The British have been very good at making sure that when they leave their colonies, whether it's in Africa, the Middle East, or India, the British have been very good at making sure that they would be in a position of political, economic disarray for many, many years to come.
India, Pakistan is just
sure.
Example.
Yeah, well, to coin a phrase, you know, the Canadian-U.S. border is one line for about 1,000 miles in the west. All national borders are insane and almost entirely based on competition. And to coin a phrase, competition for resources and playing things against one another. And to coin a phrase, in a competitive society, in a class in a capitalist society, you're going to have these antagonisms because everyone is fighting over the pie, it's not entirely.
I think what I'll do is a little song which isn't really about revolution, but it. So we're talking about America and Australia. Maybe I'll on this show I'll do a You tote that barge and you lift that bale, like the old song says. You get a little drunk and you land in jail, like the old song says. It's the same old song, oh, it's the same old melody. It's the same old story. They got a stranglehold on me, and to death in America over the vision of the gold mine. Oh, it drives me on. I'm gonna buy every woman in America. I put $1 million diamond ring on every one. I was a gopher for Estee Lauder. I watered the lawn. I cut the roses around the border every day at dawn. Every time EL came round, I have to hide behind a tree. Her perfume fortune's got a stranglehold on me. And I'm bleeding to death in America over the vision of the gold mine. Drives me on. I'm gonna buy every woman in America. I put $1 million diamond ring on every one. Well, say, can you see by by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we saw when the twilight's last gleaming. I built a boat for John Paul Getty. Every day I swept the jetty. Johnny, he signed the check. Just another million more and I'll be finally free. Those greenback dollars got a stranglehold on me, and I'm bleeding to death in America over the vision of the gold mine. Oh, it drives me on. I'm gonna buy every woman in America. I put $1 million diamond ring on every one I want. I made a bed for Leona Helmsley in a big hotel. The memory of it, oh, it overwhelms me, and my wallet as well. I used to see the guests arrive. I never saw them leave. Those 10-cent tips have got a stranglehold on me, and I'm bleeding to death in America. Yeah, but the vision of the gold mine, oh, it drives me on. I'm gonna buy every woman in America. I'll put $1 million diamond ring on everyone. Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we saw in the twilight's last gleaming? From the Bowery, 1992. I'm 44 and dying from pining over you. I went to join Club Med. They gave me Noah's Ark. Oh, I'm dragging on my cigarette and drooling in the dark. Love goes wrong, love goes right. It don't matter how it travels when it tangles out of sight. Love goes right, love goes wrong. It don't matter how it travels.